We are heading to the top of this rather large dune here in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. We're going to take a look at the Wright brothers memorial at the very top here. This commemorates the 1903 flight that Orville and Wilbur Wright made on December 17th, 1903. The hill was a good launching point. It was high enough and in a windy spot of the United States. And it had the aid of a counterweight as well, which would get them going. Their small engine that they had initially wasn't powerful enough to get them off the ground from a dead stop. So they needed a few extra helps. And this was one of them. Yeah, it's a nice monument up here. And let me give you a walk around. I'll fast forward this bit so it doesn't become too long of a video. But here you can see what it looks like on all sides. And then after we do this, we'll go back down to the bottom and catch one of the tours. One of the tour guides that work here at the park. Okay, going back down, let me show you the elevation difference between the top of that hill and the field below. And you can see how it would have given you a good running start from up there on the top to down here. So we're going to go catch one of the tours, and in case you were wondering, it's $10 per person to enter the park unless you have one of their passes or something along those lines.
So we're going to stop and take a quick tour of the Wright Brothers National Memorial. We're going to start here. We're going to talk a few moments. If you guys want to find a seat on the steps, you can. If you want to stand, that's fine too. We're going to then walk down to the camp buildings and then on to the flight line. All right, so we're going to get started. I want everybody to think about their first flight. Who's all flown before? My first flight was to Great Lakes to boot camp. Now, I want you to think about your first flight. Were you excited? Were you nervous? We're going to talk about how that first flight came to be. Now, have you ever dreamed about doing anything? Have you ever dreamed about something and you wanted to do it and went through with it? We're going to talk about two brothers who had a dream and they pushed through adversity to make that dream come true. And where did that dream come about? Probably the summer of 1896. Orville lay sick in bed, dying from typhoid fever. He was near death. Wilbur is sitting at his side along with his sister. His sister and brother are taking care of him. And Wilbur would read to Orville as one of the things that kind of helped Orville along, maybe hopefully help him get better. So he's reading, and everybody has their own, people that they follow, people that excite them. One of the people that the Wright brothers followed was a man by the name of Otto Lilienthal. Lilienthal was a German hang glider. He'd been hang gliding since the 1860s. Now, Will was reading the newspaper and he comes across this article and, oh no, Otto Lilienthal had fallen 50 foot to his death. Wilbur dare not tell Orville this because he feared it would make his condition worse. He kept it to himself, but at that point, Wilbur will decide that he is going to take over Lilienthal's work and figure out control of a glider. So now when Orville begins to get better later that month, Wilbur tells Orville. Orville's saddened by Lilienthal, but it doesn't take him much to get on board, and the brothers start gathering up all the books in the house on what subject? birds. They start picking up everything they could find on birds. Lilienthal studied birds. He actually used a bi-wing glider. They're going to use a bi-wing glider, as we see here behind us in the museum, the plane. Their first glider is going to be bi-wing. And they're going to shape their wings like a bird's wing. And as they look at birds, as they study birds, they realize that when a bird turns in the air, if we watch their wings ever so slightly, they don't do like this. They turn one tip of one wing up, the tip of the other wing down, and they turn in the air. Now, one day, after Wilbur has wrote the Smithsonian, and he has gotten all the stuff on aeronautics, and he's standing there, he's talking to somebody in his shop. What kind of shop? His bicycle shop in Dayton, Ohio. He's standing there, and he has this inner tube box in his hand. If we think about an inner tube box, it's long and rectangle, kind of like a bow wing, right? If we think about it. He's standing there, he's talking to the guy that he's doing work for, and he's just holding that inner tube box doing this number. And he looks down and he realizes when he presses one end of the box down, the tip of the box goes down, the other tip goes up, kind of like a bird turning through the air. That's when they get the idea, when Wilbur gets the idea of what we call wing warping. That's going to create our ability to turn in the air. Now, how are we going to figure out how to control? We don't want to end up like Lilienthal. So the brothers decide they're going to build a kite. They build this huge kite. We got to find a place to experiment with that kite. So they get on the internet, right? No? They write the National Weather Service and they say, hey, we need a windy place. Where is the windiest place in the United States? Where's the windiest place in the United States? Chicago, the Windy City. The brothers determined they needed about a 20-mile-an-hour headwind if they're ever going to take flight with the plane behind us here. So that's one thing they need, but they need something else. They need two more things. They need sand. Now, I want you to look behind me here. I want you to imagine there is no grass, there's no trees. This area out here looked as much to Orville as it looks much to him as the Sahara Desert, as he thought the Sahara Desert would look like. Orville never been to the Sahara, but that's what he said this area looked like. Now they needed sand because they didn't want to end up like Lilienthal. If they had to make a really quick landing, i.e. crash landing, they wanted someplace soft to land. They also needed seclusion. Why would we need seclusion? Well, we ain't worried. Well, they probably were maybe not hurting somebody, but they're worried because they don't have a patent for their invention. They don't want anybody to see what they're doing. So the brothers, they look, and Chicago's not going to work, so they look down the list. Number 6 on the list is Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. They send out letters. The only ones to write back is Kitty Hawk. And now, keep in mind, this is the South, right? Good, honest folks down here. They send them a nice letter. They say, you boys, y'all come on down. We'd love to have you. We know you want to fly. Bless your hearts. Don't think you're going to do it. But y'all come on down anyway. And that's the type of letter they got. And they decided that, hey, this place has everything we needed. Because Kitty Hawk, North Carolina at the time only had 60 people living in it. 1 or 2 more people living today. Here. So They decided this was the perfect place, Kitty Hawk. The people were very inviting. We have wind, we have sand, we have seclusion. To give you an idea of how secluded it was, when Wilbur first gets down here, he's the one that comes, scouts everything out. He walks up to somebody over on the coast over here, mainland North Carolina. There are no bridges. He says, hey, can you take me to Kitty Hawk? And the person said, huh? Kitty where? Can you take me to Kitty Hawk? Takes him 3 days to find someone to take him to Kitty Hawk. That'll give you an idea of how secluded it is. Now I want you to think about something before we move on. We're about to move down to the camp building. I want you to think about if you've ever tried something really difficult in your life. And if you tried something really difficult for the first time, it got so difficult, did you ever give up? Let's walk down to the camp building and talk about where they stayed. All right, I want you to think about for a moment. I want you to think about, have you ever tried something difficult and it got so difficult that you decided you're going to give up? If you've done that, if you've tried something difficult and it got so difficult you gave up, I want you to take a step back. If you took a step back, you're in the same company as Orville and Wilbur Wright. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Behold, the power of flight. It worked. We'll talk a little bit about that. It's 1900. The brothers get down here. They get their kite down here. Remember, we're going to figure out wing warping. They get their kite up. They're flying their kite, this big, huge box kite. They got strings attached to the wings so they can do this wing warping. And as they pull the strings, the wing warping actually works. It makes the kite turn and move in the air like they want it. While they're here, they're not living in these nice buildings. They're actually living in a tent in 1900. But they're building these buildings because they figure, hey, we're going to come back down here. They only had to pay $1.20 rent. You guys probably pay a little bit more, right?
Yeah, just a little bit.
So they decided they're going to come back down. Sorry about that. They like to fly over for some reason. But they're going to come back down here later on. And so since the wing warping's working so well with their kite, that they're going to come back in 1901. They're going to try a glider. It's time to try a glider at this point. So they go home to Dayton, Ohio. They build a glider. They come back down in 1901. They get everything here. They're trudging up the beach with their glider parts. And they get ready. They're going to stay their first night in their camp building. Remember, they built that up. When they get here, the camp building was knocked down, along with the hangar. We get a lot of storms here on the Outer Banks. Probably was a hurricane or something like that, or a strong nor'easter or something. Something knocked it down. Either way, they're going to have to rebuild their camp building, but that's all right. We got a glider. We're going to figure this control problem out, right? Not a problem. The entire time they're doing this, mosquitoes are worse this year than they were the last. It's all right. We got our glider. So they go up on the Kill Devil Hill behind me here, which was about 500 foot closer. Keep in mind, Kill Devil Hill was a sand dune at one point. Between 1903 and 1928, it moved 500 foot that direction. But they went up on the Kill Devil Hill, and they took their glider up after they got together, and they come off. They're going to try these long, straight flights to make sure the glider is actually gliding the way they need it to. So they come off, and they're actually gaining these long distances, farther than possibly anybody's ever glided before. Everything's working well. They're still fighting those mosquitoes though, right? Well, now it's time to figure out control. That's what we're here for. So the brothers take it back up on the Kill Devil Hill. They go to make that turn, and boom, right to the ground. It's all right, it was our first time, not a big deal. Get everything up, go back up to Kill Devil Hill here. They come off, fly, boom, right to the ground. It's only our second try, not a big deal. Okay, gather everything back up, go back up to the top of the hill. They come off, go to make that turn, boom, right to the ground. Time and time and time and time and time again, fighting those mosquitoes, rebuilding their house over here. Every time they try to come off of Kill Devil Hill, they lose control of that glider. It gets so frustrating. They decide they're going to leave. Too many mosquitoes. Sun's beating down on us. They go back, you get on a boat, they go across, they get on a train, they're going home. Wilbur will look at Orville and he says, man will not fly in 1,000 years. I'm done with it. Not gonna do it no more. They get home, they live with their sister Catherine. They go walking by Catherine, they say, hey Catherine, how's it going? They just walk on. They don't say anything. They don't talk about flying. It bothers Catherine so bad, she writes her dad, says, hey, the boys are home. That's what she called them, the boys are home early. They're not talking about flying. In fact, they're not talking about much of anything. Orville gets a telegram saying, hey, come to this aeronautics conference, talk to us about what you've been doing at Kitty Hawk. Orville looks at it and says, I ain't doing that. I'm done. We all have that one person that believes in us, right? Whether it's mom or dad, whether it's a sibling, maybe a cousin or a best friend. Well, the Wright brothers, it just happened to be their sister, Catherine. Catherine goes to Wilbur and says, look, I know you're upset. I know that you run into some trouble at Kitty Hawk. But why don't you go to this aeronautics conference? You might learn something. Wilbur kind of slouches, walks out of the house, head all down. He's going to this aeronautics conference. He walks into the room, all the people there, and he starts talking. And before you know it, he realizes, hey, I know more than anybody in here about flight. You know what? Maybe I can figure this out. So he goes home, he tells Orville. Orville reaches up, he's pulling down all these volumes of notes because the brothers taking notes. And they start flipping through and they're trying to figure out what's going on. Why couldn't we control this thing? Now, if we think about a bird flying through the air, making that turn, as it flies through the air with both those wings out, what else does it have? It has tail feathers. For the Wright brothers, they had not placed a rudder on their glider. No one else had either. So they said, hey, well, maybe let's get a rudder on this thing and see, like a boat, and see if we can't figure this out. So they put a rudder on the plane. In 1902, they traveled back down here to Kitty Hawk. And they go up on the Kill Devil Hill. Now they first try a fixed rudder and they realize that it's not working very well for them. In fact, it bothers Orville so bad that he stays up one night that he had been drinking coffee all that day. And but by the time he wakes up the next morning, he realizes, well, hey, if I can actually move the rudder like a boat rudder, maybe it will help the plane move better. And when they actually create it where the rudder moves with the wings, the actual glider begins to move the way they want it to. And before you know it, the brothers are doing something that no one has ever done before in the world. They are controlling the glider right here on this very spot that you stand. Taking long glides, turning through the air. Now it's time to place an engine on this glider and take off for the very first time in the heavier than air powered machine. Something that man had, or the human race had never done before. You guys ready to fly? Let's walk over to the flight line. All right, I got a little ahead of myself. I apologize. So, what we got to do? Where are we going to find the power source? So, the brothers, they're looking at these engines. Other people have been trying to place engines on flying machines, but they've been using automobile engines. Automobile engine is very heavy. The brothers determined they needed an engine that was less than 200 pounds and 8 horsepower. So they write, or they get on the computer again, right? They write these automobile makers and they say, hey, can you make me this engine? And they all kind of laugh at them. Say, oh, that can't be done. So they turn to one of their employees, a man by the name of Charlie Taylor. Say, hey, Charlie, can you make me this engine? Charlie said, not a problem. Not only does it make it less than 200 pounds, it's 170 pounds, and it's 12 horsepower, 4 horsepower more than what they needed. So now they come down, it's 1903. They're ready to fly. They're getting their plane parts shipped down. They get here before their plane parts do. They're taking flights off of Kill Devil Hill while they're waiting for their plane parts to get here. This was late September. Now they placed themselves in a time constraint. They told Dad, you know what happens when you tell Dad? You promise Dad, hey, we're going to be home by Christmas. That's all right, September, Christmas, not a problem. Got to keep in mind they're waiting for those plane parts to get here. So the plane parts are coming down and the engine parts are coming down, and they're putting the plane together. They're getting it ready. They get the plane ready to go sometime around early November. That's all right, we still got a whole 2 months to go. So they get the plane together, get it out here on the flight line. They crank the engine up, and it's really loud, but it's working. The propellers begin to turn and snap. The propeller shafts break. That's all right. Get on Amazon, right? Now, so what they do is they go up and they go up the beach about 4 miles. They get on the telegram and send Charlie Taylor telegram and say, hey Charlie, we broke the propeller shafts. Can you make us some more? Not a problem. I can do it. Makes the propeller shafts, sends them down to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, puts them on. It's late November. They get the plane back out here on the flight line. They get ready, crank the engine up, loud again. Propellers begin to turn, snap. Getting close to Christmas, got to get home. So Orville will jump on a boat, get on a train, go all the way back to Dayton, Ohio. He'll craft his own propeller shafts, come all the way back down here, get the plane ready to go. It's December 14th, 1903. It's time to fly. Now, these two are brothers. And you guys, if you have siblings or children, you know how siblings work, how they interact with one another. Now, how do you think these boys are going to decide who's going to fly first? Paper, rock, scissors, maybe? They actually flip a coin. They flip a coin, and Wilbur will win that coin toss. Wilbur, now, you remember what the key thing that we need to fly? You remember what that was? 20-mile-an-hour headwind. It's 4-mile-an-hour headwind that happened that day. Well, you know what happens when you get put in a time constraint, you get a little desperate, you probably try things you probably shouldn't do. They start looking around and they, oh, there's a hill over here. Let's take the plane up on top of the hill, see if we can't get some lift out of the height of the hill over here. So they take the plane up on top of Kill Devil Hill, start to come down this trail behind me, this rail behind me. It was up on top of the hill at that point. And instead of going up in the air, it goes right in the ground and breaks the elevator. Well, darn. December 25th, right around the corner, the brothers worked through the night, on through the next day. By the 17th, they've fixed the plane. It's time to fly. They contact the folks down the beach at the life-saving station. Remember those folks that said, bless your hearts? They invited those folks on up. They come up here. They get another guy who's going to take a camera. They have one of the things they purchased before they got here in 1900 was this huge camera. They place it over here in this area. Wilbur is standing that morning here to the right of the plane. Now, why is Wilbur standing to the right of the plane? These guys are siblings, right? It's Orville's turn. It's Orville's turn to fly because he lost the bet on December 14th. So it's Orville's turn. Orville's on the plane. They crank the engine up. Everything begins to work. Remember your your first flight? The plane begins moving slowly down the rail behind me initially, and eventually starts picking up speed. It stabilizes itself. Wilbur trudging along, running along beside it in the sand, and eventually it takes off into the air. It would be the first time that we leave the Earth in a heavier than air powered flying machine. Right here, December 17th, 1903, took off and flew 120 feet in 12 seconds, this first marker. Remember the guy over here with the camera? They run back, they said, did you get the shot? Did you get the shot? He's like, yeah, man, not a problem, look. No. They actually don't find out until a couple months later that they actually get that shot. If you walk into the visitor center here, you walk around the corner to the right, there's a colorized photo of that very first flight that took place right here. Your first flight began right here on December 17th, 1903. 3 more times that day the brothers will take flight, taking turns. Wilbur be the second flight at the second and land at the second marker. Orville the third, landing at the third marker, and Wilbur going all the way to the very end of this field at the fourth marker. 852 feet and 59 seconds. Just a few short years later, not only were we flying like this gentleman up here, but men were flying 11 years later, and they were shooting at one another, dropping bombs on one another in World War I. Orville would live long enough to have heard that someone broke the sound barrier in an airplane. Someone flew over 900 miles an hour just 44 short years later after he took off right here. 66 years after this first flight, we stepped on the moon. In 2021, what happened? We had a rover on Mars. That rover had a piece of the Wright flyer in it. That's the end of my program, folks. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions, comments, then leave Bill threats. I'll take them now. I'll be around for a couple of minutes. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Thank you. All right, good tour. Right behind where we were just a moment ago, there's a museum, and they have a replica of the Wright flyer, as you see here. And the original, it was loaned out to various museums after the original flight. Spent a time in Great Britain, and then it came back, and it now sits in its permanent home in the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., if you want to go up and see that. A really nice replica they have. Okay, here's part of one of the original engines. It is a 4-cylinder, water-cooled engine. It's amazing, but needed to be lightweight at the time, and it was. And that's what powered those 2 propellers you see. To the other side. All right, there we have it. Quick look at the Wright Brothers Memorial in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. It's a great model, by the way.